Oh, hello, world. Welcome to Comic Book News. I'm your old pal, Dan Shaheen. Today we got another humdinger of a show for you as we talk to dandy Don Simpson. You know him from Megaton Man, Don Simpson's Bizarre Heroes. You know him from 1963 and in Pictopia. We'll talk about all those things and more coming up in just a minute. First, a little bit of show business. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please consider clicking on subscribe. There's a little button down there. You click subscribe if you're on YouTube anyway, and you can see all the great new interviews as I drop them. Well, like who, Dan? Well, coming up in a couple of weeks, we've got this dude you may have heard of. His name is Paul Levitz. We'll talk to him about his long history in comics at DC and what he's up to these days. And then not long after that, we're going to talk to Mike Richardson of Dark Horse Comics. This is a guy I've been wanting to bring in here for a really long time. You better believe we're going to talk about Concrete, which I love. And we'll talk about Paul Chow. We'll talk about all the amazing comics Mike Richardson has published in his storied career. We got people watching already. Oh, you better believe we'll talk about 1963. Don't worry, we're going to get there. Welcome. You know, guys, you can ask questions throughout the show if you want. I can't promise I'll get to them then, but at the end of the show, we have a little dedicated Q&A section. So keep those comments coming. If you feel like just interrupting in the middle of the show, you can do so. It's this thing called Super Chat. You got to pay some money. So figure that one out on your own. What else? Oh my gosh. If you want to see your comics here on this show, on the $1 Million Comics Cam, there's one place you should send them, and that's to the $1 Million Mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. Send them in. We'll spread them out on the $1 Million Comics Cam and give you our honest opinion on them. Okay. What now? Well, let's go. Where are we going to go? We got to go. We can't talk to Don here. We got to take him, you know where.
The Bat Pulse.
Oh my gosh, here we are in the Bat Cave, ready to talk to Dandy Don. Without any further ado, let's bring him on in. Hey, Don Simpson, welcome to Comic Book News.
How'd you get in here? You're from Pittsburgh, huh?
I was born there. I moved when I was 1, but I still like cling to the allure of the Pittsburgher.
Steeler Nation, huh?
Totally. I'm a true Pittsburgh wannabe. We had an interview. I had Jim Rugg and Ned Piskor have both been in here.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
We did a whole Pittsburgh trivia spot, the Pittsburgh shoehorn, as I shoehorned Pittsburgh trivia into our interview. You guys can check that out if you like it. How do you love it? How do you like living there, Don?
Well, I'm here in my room closet. I'm drawing. I don't know if you can see any of this. We were checking this before.
Yeah.
I use blue pencil, and sometimes it doesn't show up too well, but I'm just going to keep scribbling here, and we can chat.
Yeah,
and talk.
Please.
What
you working on?
Oh, well, we didn't mention this in the pregame warm-up, but I'm writing. I'm mostly writing prose. I'm writing the Ms. Megaton Man maxi series. I just passed 150 chapters, 500,000 words. About 65,000 of them might be worth reading, but they're kind of spread out. And I've been. I
got some pictures from that. If you want to see them, I definitely wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Who was that guy?
We go into the virtual world here, and I've got what do we got here? You got your Here we go. Let's talk a little bit about Ms. Megaton Man. Megaton Man. Do people pronounce it wrong? How do you pronounce it's Megaton, right? But my whole life I've said Megaton because I'm a dummy.
Well, people think of photons and neutrons, but it's megaton is a ton. It's 1,000,000 tons of TNT, or the explosive force equivalent thereof. I'm not a nuclear physicist, but it's you heard about it recently in the news that volcano that erupted was a 10 megaton blast or something. That's the last I heard of it. But in the early 80s, of course, they were talking about 20 megaton warheads aimed at Detroit and Pittsburgh. And I was living in Detroit at the time. I live in Pittsburgh now. My parents and relatives are from Pittsburgh, but I grew up in Detroit. And ground zero for Detroit was the General Motors building, which was about 2 miles from where I lived. Ground zero being the target of the USSR, the Russians, in case of a nuclear war. So, Megaton Man was born of the early 80s, the Cold War, Reagan, although I didn't want to caricature Reagan, so I made Orson Welles the president of the United States. But I just did this one shot. I was living in Detroit. I was washing dishes in a restaurant, and I was teaching myself the craft and trying to break into cartooning. And I did the whole first issue and mailed it off to a bunch of publishers that no longer exist. I mailed it to First Comics, to Eclipse, to Epic Illustrated, Mad Magazine, Heavy Metal, Kamiko, I think. I don't know. I got a lot of rejection letters, but Kitchen Sink wanted to print it. They had just started doing the Spirit in color, Will Eisner's Spirit. And
did you send it to Now Comics? Because when I look at your stuff, I go, oh, this would kind of fit in with like Ralph Snart and some of the stuff they were publishing.
I think they came later. I don't think they were in existence in '84, but
maybe not till a little bit later. Yeah.
Anyway, but because the Spirit was in color, they needed more color comics to kind of bring the unit cost down, to get a better deal with their printer. And I just timing was everything. And they gave a 22, 23-year-old complete unknown with no experience. And worse than that, I had no ideas past the first issue. I just did this one shot. I figured I would get maybe I could break into the industry as a letterer, which I did in 1963. That was my big
right.
But I didn't expect anybody to necessarily pick this up right away, but it just seemed to click. And then Dennis Kitchen said, well, can you do this every other month? And I said, sure. And I had no idea what I was doing, but you just ride the horse. So that's how it got started. But yeah, Megaton is comes out of the nuclear freeze era, the Cold War era. And Ms. Megaton Man was simply, I have this whole backstory now. I have this whole world that I've kind of retro created, world building, but I didn't have anything in the early 80s. I was just making it up as I went along, and I assumed that people would get the jokes. They would get the team headquarters and the newspaper and the secret identity and the all the tropes of superhero comics.
And this is widely speaking, this is the Don Simpson's Bizarre Heroes universe.
Yeah, I attached all of it. Well, it's now I've got I'm in the prose series, in the maxi series, I've got Border Worlds showing up now. So they've come back in time. I haven't yet. Well, I've had Forbidden Frankenstein in meets Megaton Man. So the Anton Drek world, all you have to do is put clothes on these characters, and then they become, Forbidden Frankenstein just becomes regular Frankenstein. And I've already connected all that, so it's all one big happy family now. And it started out as a parody, and it started out as kind of making fun of continuity and the ridiculous obsession that fans have with trying to make sense. They're trying to make rational sense of 60 years of history of different creative teams, and why does Flash have lines on the bottoms of his shoes in one issue and not in the other, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
I was making fun of all that, but now, of course, I'm a hypocrite because I'm completely obsessed with all these continuity issues, and I've got timelines, I've got family histories now, and Clarissa, Ms. Megaton Man, is she's kind of the perfect character, kind of right in between Bizarre Heroes and Megaton Man. She can be taken seriously. She's got a smart mouth. She can be funny. She can be snarky, and she became the perfect kind of first person narrator to introduce. Yeah, there she is. And and I was just making this up panel by panel, like literally issue by issue. I had no unfolding narrative. I would just like, okay, what's that panel you just showed us the X Thems one shot, which would be like the 14th or 15th issue of Megaton Man altogether. But I just was trying to make the deadline, like next issue I'm going to have them do a bunch of stuff. And she was just a completely minor character. Just, you see Stella next to her. Stella goes back to college. She's the see-through girl, and she quits the Megatropolis Quartet and goes back to college. And I just needed somebody for Stella to talk to. And so I based it on somebody I knew. There's just this African-American woman who worked at the restaurant where I washed dishes. And I made her the person that Stella's talking to while she's registering for classes and so on. But then I thought, well, I'll make, I wasn't trying to be woke or diverse or anything. I had this character, and I'll make her live in the house with these people. And then she has an infatuation with Yarn Man, and then she becomes a character. She becomes a superhero herself. She becomes a mega hero herself. So I just made these things up one after the other. My approach is just to draw something, and while I'm drawing, and I'm doing this with 1963, I draw a panel, and hopefully I will get the idea for the next panel. It's very improbable.
Well, before we get to 1963, Don, I need to ask you. My sources have been begging me to tell
1963 was about 60 years ago. So,
what you brought him up? So talk about the infamous Anton Drek, if you will.
Well, it's kind of like my life now. I'm working on about 5 different projects right now, and I don't have a deadline for any of them. I have the weekly prose thing. I'm doing this parody thing. I'm doing satire. I'm doing commissions. It's all just one big thing. Back in the late 80s, I was working on. I'd done the X Thems, and I did Yarn Man #1, and I was working on Border Worlds Maroon #1. I was working on Bizarre Heroes #1, which is a kitchen sink one shot, and ostensibly a serious superhero comic. And I was working on Tyranno Man #1, and I was working on Wendy Whitebread #1, and I had penciled half of this thing. You have to remember that Omaha the Cat Dancer was being published by Kitchen Sink, which was a very explicit comic book. Howard Chaykin was doing The Black Kiss, which was kind of an R-rated, and I thought it was just I thought it was just pulling its punches. So I did this really dirty comic. I thought, I'm going to do I'm going to show these people how to do a dirty comic book. So I created Wendy Whitebread, and I posted things on just recently. I posted the original art for the cover. There was a thumbnail sketch that I'd forgotten completely about, but I think I was going to call it Undercover Prostitute. Anyway, to be, just I penciled half of the comic, and I made photocopies. I sent it to Kitchen. They didn't want to touch it. And I sent it to a friend from Detroit, Tom Powers, who was interning, or he was an assistant editor at the Comics Journal at Fantagraphics. And 1990, when they started the Monster Comics line, Tom calls me up and says, "Do you want to draw King Kong?" And it's not something I would have ever tried out for like this was my life dream or anything. I liked the movie and I loved the movie and I loved the story, but I didn't put myself forward for this. So I said, well, yeah, sure. So once that started, he said, we're doing Monster Comics. Now we're doing this thing called Eros Comics, which is going to be adults only. And this Wendy Whitebread's been sitting in his drawer for 2 or 3 years by this point. And he says, do you want to finish this up? And I said, well, sure. And it's one of those things where I start something and I just make it up as I go along. And then at some point somebody says, wrap this up and we'll publish it. And that happened with Megaton Man. That happened with Tyranno Man. That happened with Wendy, certainly. I didn't have any plan for it to, I didn't have like a marketing plan or, any audience in mind. And so it was an open secret that this was Don Simpson. I never tried to hide behind this name or anything. It was just, that was just part of the entertainment value was Anton Drek was the ridiculous pseudonym. So then that led to Forbidden Frankenstein and a few other things. Sorry, I'm getting a little tickle. But I just didn't have any overarching plan of how it connected with my narrative or my universe or anything like that. It wasn't until 1991, and I did a print. I don't know if you would happen to have a graphic of it, but this was the I can almost show you.
Yeah, which one?
Let me see if I can find. Oh, here we go. So I did a kind of a poster size print. This is the ad for it. This is the Savage Dragon. I'm going to go close to my camera here.
Yeah, close as you can. Yeah, that's great.
Now, this was, here it is.
We can see that.
This was a print that I had published here in Pittsburgh. It was like 15 by 24 inches. And it had all my characters. You can see it's all my characters, Megaton Man, Border Worlds, Anton Drek, the Future Bizarre Heroes. I put everything, and that was based on the, I don't know if you ever saw the Jack Kirby letterhead from the Simon Kirby letterhead. They had a letterhead where they put all their characters in a kind of class portrait. So I did that so I could sell it at shows. But then as soon as I had all these characters on one page, I said, why don't I have them team up? Why don't I have crossovers? Why don't I work out how they could all interrelate? And like I said, I've had, because when I did the Bizarre Heroes one shot, I was simply thinking that was a separate storyline. But then when I started Don Simpson's Bizarre Heroes, which you had the cover up before,
here we go.
Then I had, of course, I kind of bailed insecurely. I needed Megaton Man on the cover to help sell the book. But then the characters, by this point, this is issue 9 or something, they completely took over the storylines. I was just back to doing Megaton Man again. It was kind of like when Burt Breathitt did Opus or
Outland. Yeah, and then
And then
Opus just wormed his way back in and took it over.
it just took over again. So Megaton Man just took over again, the whole storyline, the whole characters. I've been doing that more or less. I've had several interruptions in my career, but I'm still at it. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Well, we love it, Dom. I mean, Cowboy Gorilla. Come on, that's a winner in any age.
That's Chris Ecker's favorite character. Chris Ecker from Big Bang Comics. He loves Cowboy Gorilla.
How you can't beat that? That's too in the 50s. That would have eaten all comics in the 1950s.
I'm right here. See if I can find this.
And also, it's true. Marvel cease and desist.
I just went to
you.
What's that?
It's true. Marvel sent you a cease and desist letter on Yarn Man and your other parody characters. Your FF parody.
Well, that's another story we can get. I want to show you this. This is
yeah.
Chris Ecker made these. These are Cowboy Gorilla dolls.
Yes.
And he took.
Oh my gosh! It's like Amigo.
He took a Lone Ranger. He put a gorilla head on. He's even got the holes in the hat. And he did two of these. I forget which one he did first. And he did the same. He's got a rifle here.
Yeah.
He's got a rifle and he's got the hat with the holes in it.
Beautiful.
I think these are Marks. Whatever those Marks gunslinger. But that those are Chris Ecker creations that he gifted me years ago.
That's a winning concept for sure. I think, the Bizarre Heroes really is a synthesis of like all that stuff you love from that era, but then also with an underground edge to it, right? You want to talk about your influences because I mean the superhero influences are very evident in what you're satirizing and parodying. But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the influence on your style, there seems to be a lot of underground influence on what you're doing.
Yeah, I grew up with, again, I've got all kind of stuff within reach here. I grew up with, this was the first issue of Mad magazine that I had bought.
Oh, great one.
1972. That's not the exact copy, but I found that at a used bookstore. But I read, Charlie Brown, the newspapers. I just caught the tail end of Al Cap, Little Abner in the Detroit News. Funky Winkerbean, all that stuff in the newspapers. I can remember the Batman comic strip earlier. I grew up with Batman, Adam West on TV is what I grew up with, and on network television, and then the George Reeves, whichever plural or singular, Superman reruns, and all the cartoons. And then I was into the cartooning, and one of the first issues I got was Not Brand Eck, coverless, issue 12. If you can imagine, that was my first Marvel comic that I owned, and I didn't even know who they were making fun of, like Thor, and I didn't know who the characters were, but they were making fun of themselves. And then the summer of 1972, I started. Excuse me, I'm going to answer my email while I'm at it. I just started buying everything that came out with a September 1972 cover date. I had picked up one of my elementary school teachers brought in a stack of Lois Lane and Jack Kirby, Jimmy Olsen. They were like, I assume that they were issues that had not been returned to the distributor from some drugstore or some.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought those in, and we had a stack of comic books. There were like 10 copies of the same issues, and Archie and Gold Key and a few DC comics. And we all got, at the end of the school year, I got a copy of each of the issues. And I started buying comic books that summer, but I didn't buy DC. I mostly bought Marvels. And so I got hooked on Spider-Man. And the following month, Luke Cage came out, and Doc Savage came out, and The Claws of the Cat #1 came out in October of '72. That would be the cover date. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I was just buying Marvel comics. And I was reading Mad Magazine, and then toward high school, as high school started, I became sophisticated. I was reading Undergrounds, and I was reading I don't have a copy of the book anymore. I keep forgetting I don't own it anymore. But there was a book called by P.R. Garriock, which was a British book. It was called The Masters of Comic Book Art. And I was in Pittsburgh on a visit, and I went to the Atlantic bookstore, and they had a remaindered copy for like $4 or $5. They had a whole stack of these. And that book had Wally Wood and Harvey Kurtzman and Robert Crumb, Will Eisner, Jean Giraud, Philippe Drouillet, a couple British guys, and what was astonishing to me was there was no Jack Kirby, there was no Steranko, no Neil Adams.
Yeah, and recognition of Crumb at that time might have even today it's a little bit dicey politically for some people.
Yeah, but Crumb is now part of the fine art world. There's been several exhibits. If you do a Google search on Crumb, you can't find any issues, any single issues. He's got so many book versions and collections out, which is astonishing because in those days it was still stapled comic books and Apex novelties and all the underground imprints. Kitchen Sink did a few, obviously, Mr. Natural and so forth.
Yes. So, I mean, that stuff and the underground stuff obviously informed what you're doing. I mean, there's a sexual edge even to Bizarre Heroes and Megaton Man.
Sexual?
Yes. Yeah, right. You're a sexy dude, Don. You like sexy gals and you like sexy situations in your art. I mean, even in some of your commissions. Wait a minute. I got one right here.
I just think people have dirty minds, but that book just gave me a lease on life because I was kind of outgrowing superheroes. I was into Master of Kung Fu by Galassi, and everything that I liked was being canceled. I would read the Guardians of the Galaxy that only lasted a few issues, and I would read Tiger the Werewoman, and that would be short-lived. And I didn't like. I initially liked the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and Captain America and the Avengers. But around 76, 77, I was into Howard the Duck. Obviously, was a major influence, and Conan and things like that. But the Garriock book really expanded and ignited and prolonged my interest in comics. So then I started gravitating toward heavy metal, into the undergrounds. I met Keith Pollard around that time, who was penciling Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way had just come out. So that really was my textbook. And I showed you this before. Let me just show you. If you want to see, this is my art gallery collection.
Oh yeah, we want to see this, folks. Let me ISO you here. So
this is, I collected some things, and this was back when this stuff was not worth $3.3 million. On the over here, this is John Romita doing the Fantastic Four with Joe Sinnott, and this is John Romita, inked by John Veerporten in the center. John Veerporten is an underrated talent. And last but not least is Marie Severin, Wally Wood, Claws of the Cat. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Nice.
And there's
Yeah.
a
Nice.
Jack
I love
Kirby.
this Kirby piece. This is
That's a Jack
awesome.
Kirby War thing. Let me reorient my camera. Those are my diplomas.
Okay. Well,
Believe it or not, I have a PhD in the history of art and architecture, which entitles me to a cup of coffee anytime I want.
absolutely, Don.
If I have $4 and go into a Starbucks.
Well, Don.
But
So obviously you're a 70s Marvel head, but
Yeah.
like your stuff really reminds me the characters and stuff that you parodied seem to come from that earlier age, right? Like the 60s Lee Kirby era Marvel stuff really had a hold on you.
well, all that
as
stuff,
well.
the Son of Origins of Marvel Comics and all that kind of stuff was also coming out, and all the treasuries
Yes, yeah.
coming out. So all the key issues were being reprinted, but there wasn't like you couldn't buy. And I showed you this before. This is like, you couldn't buy the complete Commandi or the complete Fantastic Four or the complete anything. You had you just have the origin issues, and then the latest issues you'd follow. And I think I could have, and this is something I'm talking now about crafting a series. If I had the resources now, I could have borrowed like the entire run of Spider-Man or Fantastic Four and read them, but I would have to peel the plastic bags open and so forth. But that's what I should have done in the 80s. I should have studied. I should have read runs of things and figured out how to do a whole series. I never did that. Now you can do it easily. You can just read the 100 issues of Fantastic Four. But I think I would have benefited from that. I mean, I'm off the subject, but the point was that yes, there was a lot of stuff, and there was still a lot of stuff hanging around my neighborhood. There were older kids, and I would trade. I would trade 3 new issues for a Steranko Captain America or something like that. So I got to see some great stuff from the late 60s, but not.
Well, I mean, that time in comics in general, that 70s era, we were getting such great stuff from the big two, as well as the undergrounds were just putting out just such amazing stuff. And I see all that stuff synthesized into your work, Don. But if we could, I'd like to take us back for a second.
Yeah.
To 1986. Okay. And talk a little bit about, well, tell me about Anything Goes and how that led to in Pictopia.
Yeah, well, I was doing Megaton Man, and I think I was about on issue 8. I ended up doing 10 issues of Megaton Man, and I started doing Border Worlds as a backup series. And I think we announced 12 issues was going to be the end of Megaton Man, and I wanted to do something else. It turned out to be the color line kind of folded. They were losing money on the Spirit. They were losing money on Death Rattle. Megaton Man was still fairly profitable, but not enough to justify color. So Kitchen Sink told me we're gonna end it at a couple months, and so we decided to just wrap it up at 10 issues, and then I did Border Worlds in black and white, right in time for the black and white boom bust. But in that period, Gary Groth contacted me and asked me if I wanted to illustrate this story. They had this whole thing where they were being sued by Michael Fleischer. I know all this stuff by heart now because it's just been drilled into me. But apparently Harlan Ellison, there was an interview in the Comics Journal between Harlan Ellison and Gary Groth, and Harlan Ellison said that Michael Fleischer on Jonah Hex was bugfuck, which he apparently meant as a compliment, that he had this crazy dark imagination. And Michael Fleischer took tremendous offense at this and sued Ellison and the Comics Journal for libel, and it was really threatening the whole company. And by this point, Fantagraphics was publishing Love and Rockets and 8-Ball and other things. So they created a series called Anything Goes, and it was just a fundraiser. You couldn't go on Kickstarter and get a legal defense fund going. You had to publish something. So they got a bunch of artists to work for free. That's a Frank Miller cover. You see Jaime Hernandez. I think
and this was after the Steve Gerber benefit book, kind of in the same model as that, or was this before?
I don't remember the Steve Gerber benefit book at all. So
the Destroyer Duck book.
Oh yeah. I'm not sure the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think the model was proven by that this was a good way, and why not? Like, get the band together, get the gang together, put on a show, right? Put out a comic, and let's raise some money.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. So yeah, but it was a fundraiser, and so I wasn't going to get paid, and I'm pretty sure I'd already met Alan Moore by then. I met him in '85 at the San Diego Comic-Con, and he told me, he says, I'm ripping off Megaton Man. I said, well, what do you mean? He's, well, I got this character, Dr. Manhattan, so he's gonna be nuclear, and I'm not really ripping off Megaton Man. Anyway, we met, and I had parodied the Swamp Thing in issue 6 of Megaton Man. So we had at least met, and it was friendly and respectful and all that stuff. And so then Gary Gross sends me this script for in Pictopia, and you saw the PDF, and it's a typed script. It was a photocopy. Somehow this miraculously survived in the files of Eric Vincent. Anthony Smith who did Alien Fire for Kitchen Sink Press. He was the writer, and Eric Vincent was the artist. Eric ended up coloring the story, and Anthony had the coloring for the story for In Pictopia, and he had the original script, which is called In Fictopia with an F. And it was supposed to be an 8-page story. You saw how dense it is. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but it's this incredibly dense, detailed, satirical. There it is. It's like, and I had never illustrated anything other than my own ideas at this point. This was the first script I ever illustrated. And
I just want to stop us for a second. Like, Alan Moore's famous for these like super rich scripts and panel descriptions that nobody's ever going to see. It's not like these were captions. These are his instructions.
Yeah. And he's completely describing, I mean, it's a novel. He's describing the backgrounds, the atmosphere, the psychology of the characters. And then there's like 2 sentences of dialogue at the bottom. But he's what's brilliant about that was that he's totally conveying to the illustrator every thought in his head, and then it becomes your job as the cartoonist to translate that. And he doesn't care if you use a long shot or a close up, or if you show a naked woman or a crowd scene. As long it's your job now to illustrate this ridiculous, complex world. I'd never seen anything like it, and I've never seen a script like that again. I've worked with John Ostrander, I've worked with Bill Loebs, I've worked with Dan Mishkin and Gary Kahn, and their scripts are much more open, let's say. I mean, they give you a recipe, close up, long shot, dialogue. But you have to read through to the end to figure out where's this going, and that's your job. But Alan is like, here, I'm going to tell you, here's what we're going to try to do to the reader. We're going to try to bring them in. We're going to try to fool them. We're going to try to, you know, hold them in suspense for 8 pages. He clues you in immediately what he's up to. I've just never seen a script like that again. And it was 8 pages. So the first thing I did was, well, I can't draw this in 8 pages. I made it 13 pages. So I said to Gary, it's 13 pages now. He said, well, it's more free work, but less to fill up the issue. And the other thing I did was I changed the title. I thought Pictopia was too literary, so I made it Pictopia. And I figured, well, number one, I'm doing it for free. And if they have a problem with it, I don't know if I have a copy of the issue here, but if they want me to change it, I can always change it. So I don't know if I have the issue. So I went ahead and apparently Alan loved it in Pictopia, and everything else just fell together. I needed, so it's a story about this little cartoon universe. And you just mentioned before we went live that Roger Rabbit came out a couple of years later. This was before Roger Rabbit, but this is like a universe. This is like a little small town of cartooning. There's a comic book section of town. There's like where the superheroes live, it's in full color. Where the animated funny animals live, it's a ghetto. There's an underground section. There's a dive section. Blondie has resorted to prostitution. Mandrake the magician lives in a cheap walk-up apartment. And what else? So it was this dark allegorical satire about the state of the comic book industry and about cartooning, about newspaper cartooning, about the corporate takeover of everything. And so you see these these grim and gritty superheroes end up taking over the town, and the bulldozers come in, and it's kind of a blackout, black comedy. And that was it. That was my first experience. And I got Mike Cazala to pencil the funny animals. He was my friend from Detroit. He did Captain Jack for Fantagraphics, and later he worked on Ren and Stimpy. He worked on The Simpsons as an animator, a lot of stuff. And I got Pete Poplaski, who was the art director at Kitchen Sink Press, because I was living at Kitchen Sink Press at this time. Pete Poplaski could draw any style. I mean, you talk about me and my influences, but Pete Poplaski could draw anything from 1910 to the Undergrounds. He could imitate any classic newspaper style, from Alley Oop on up to Will Eisner to Crumb to anybody. So I had him draw the bar scene in pencil, and you see in the bar scene there's like Moon Mullins and Gasoline Alley and all these characters. And Flexible Flynn is supposed to be Plastic Man, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, what else do you want to know? And apparently this is everybody's favorite, or one of their favorite Alan Moore stories of all time. Are you still there? I think we lost you. I'm not hearing you. I am here, but I can't hear my. Am I still live? Please stand by if you're hearing me.
It's not as fun to do.
Hello. I'm here. I guess I'm here by myself. I don't know. I don't know what happened to my interlocutor.
Guys, I lost power. My whole place out of power. I'm connected via my phone right now in my backyard. I apologize. I'm gonna have to end this thing soon. Wait a minute, Don. Don, you're still there?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have no power at my house at all. I completely lost power in the studio. Have no internet connection other than my phone.
You're echoing.
I don't know if it's working. I completely lost power in the studio. I apologize. I think
That's okay.
I have to end this. I'm really sorry. I can't.
Just put me on screen and I'll just talk. I'll show them the artwork. Just put me on screen and I'll just talk. I'll show them the artwork.
Okay, hang on.
It's the curse. It's the curse of Alan Moore. I can tell he's already. Alan's already put a curse. It's the curse of Alan Moore. I can tell he's already. Alan's already put a curse. I just got to mute this.
Okay. Guys, it's just me for a second here. Hopefully Don can hear this. I really apologize. I mean, it's beyond my control. I hope that Don will be willing to come back and talk with me again sometime. Although I wouldn't blame him if he didn't. Wait a minute. I'm getting an interview from James King. Dan, you handled the power outage during Don's interview like a boss. Loving your chats. Thank you. I really appreciate it, everyone. I'm going to bring Don back on one more time. Maybe if he can hear this, maybe he can say goodbye. I apologize, Don. I really am. I'm embarrassed, but wait a minute. How's that? Yeah, I'm sorry, Don. Are you willing to come back again some other time? I'm really apologize.
Well, just we're on a feedback loop.
Yeah, I
I
think so.
can,
I got.
my picture seems to be coming across on YouTube okay.
Can, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I think we're okay now. Are you echo? Am I echoing? Are you hearing echo?
Yeah, you're echoing. I turned down my sound.
Okay, yeah, that I think that's the probably was the problem. Anybody out there, guys? Am I echoing out there in internet land? Give me a give me something in the chat down there. Okay, this is the magical spell of Alan Moore, as you mentioned. I think the curse
If this is the
of this.
worst he can do, I'm all right.
Okay, well, I got a little bit of power, Don. Let's power through here and let's talk for a second. Why don't you just continue? I'm sorry, where did we break off when I lost power was okay, we were talking about anything goes. We talked about the book and we started looking at the script.
Yeah.
So you got that script and it was originally, I believe, 8 pages and you expanded it to 13. You want to talk about that at all? What did you when you read it? Were you blown away right away, or did you just think, "Oh, this will be a fun thing that fits my style"?
I had read Swamp Thing, and are you getting? Is your phone on? Is your phone audio on? Maybe you can turn the
Yeah.
audio.
Oh, maybe. How's that? I'll tell you what I'll do, Don. My phone audio is on, but I'll just mute myself when you talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, try that. So I mean, the rest was history. I had read Swamp Thing, and I just didn't want to blow it. That was my only concern. I was like I was like one of the first 10 Americans to draw an Alan Moore story. I just didn't want to make a fool of myself. That was my only concern. But then it was reprinted in the best comics of the decade, and it's been on a number of people's favorite list. And as I explained in the text piece um, in the new publication, which I consider the definitive publication, I had several other people that wanted to reprint it over the years. So in 2005, Two Morrows wanted to reprint it in a collection, and Critical Comics wanted to reprint it in a collection. And I was not happy at all with the results. I described that in the text. One of them was recolored without my approval, which I thought was a real desecration of Eric's work, because Eric did such a beautiful job. You can't show the graphics now, but they're really gorgeous. So I think that came out really, the new edition came out really nice. But how that came about was an Italian publisher in 2018, 2019, they wanted to do a reprint. And by this time I knew the routine, which was that they would get permission from Alan Moore, and then they would contact the artist, and they would promise the artist anything. You can hear this from Steve Bissett as well. They would promise the artist anything that they wanted, but then they'd do whatever they want, and it would turn out all botched. And I was just tired of dealing with this routine. So I said, if you get permission from Alan, you can publish the story, but I'm not going to scan anything. I'm tired of this crap. I'm not going to sign anything. So I mentioned this on Facebook, and Gary, might as well move in here. Gary contacted me, and he said, "Well, I'll reprint it." And I thought, well, that's great, because he was, Fantagraphics had been the first original publisher, and they had been the only one who did it at a good job. So I agreed, but then he said, you have to contact Alan and get his permission. So I had been through this routine before. I thought, oh Jesus, you have to go through a third party, because nobody can talk directly to Alan Moore anymore. It hasn't happened for years. I had spoken briefly when I was lettering 1963. I had a transatlantic phone call with Alan, and I said, the only thing I remember from that, I don't know what I was asking him about, but I said, you have me as Dapper Don. I said, I'd like to be Dandy Don. And he said, well, you're the letterer. You can be whoever you want. So I became Dandy Don for 1963. Here's the, this is the original page. This was the house ad. This is the first thing we did for 63. I happen to have it in my files. That's the last thing. I haven't sold it. Nobody wants my lettering. But having to contact Alan Moore since then, I had to go through Chris Staros. You have to email Chris Staros, and then you had to email somebody else. Oh, there he is. Oh, that scared me. See, he's adding up the frequencies. So I have to go through a third party to ask Alan for his permission, and he in the case of Tomorrow's and in the case of the Critical Comics, he generously said he didn't want any royalties. He would just split it among the artists, which was nice. But it would have been nicer if he had actually, told them that they had to do a good job reprinting it. But anyway, so that was the same deal. So I said, hey, now Fantagraphics wants to do this. And I heard back from his intermediary. He said, well, Alan says he's fine with the arrangement, but he doesn't want his name on the story. And I was like really insulted and offended. And after all this crap with a couple terrible versions of the story being published, and here I'd gone to this trouble to get somebody that would actually do a good job, and they had done a good job, and they were going to do a good job. I emailed back
the premier publisher.
Pray tell. We went back and forth, and it turned out, and he finally wrote me a letter, which was cut and pasted into an email, and I just posted that this morning on my blog. And apparently he had problems with Fantagraphics and with an interview that was conducted. It all sounded exactly like the Michael Fleischer lawsuit is what it sounded like. He was offended at an interview transcript of an interview with Steve Bissett, where apparently Steve said something honest. Had nothing to do with In Pictopia. And he also, and Alan also claimed that there were, editorials in the Comics Journal about how greedy he was for working for Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane and whatever. So I said, well, and he said, well, you can, I went along with his request to take his name off it, although we didn't really have to. I thought I could convince him to change his mind. I overestimated my charm ability. And I just left it up to Gary. I said, we got all the materials. I'm not going to reprint this story with anybody else. I'm tired of this bullshit with Italians and Germans and everybody else. I don't, this is it. Either, if you want to do it, you go ahead with it. And we were thinking about doing like phony names, and I actually suggested that we credit the story to Byron Starkwinter, which is like an inside joke that nobody would know. That Alan had written a plot for Anything Goes for another story arc that was called Convention Tension, and one of the characters was clearly a kind of a Steve Gerber satire. He called himself Byron Starkwinter. It was this comic book writer who created Mookie the Worm. And if anybody wants to read these things, just email me and I'll send them a PDF.
Don, can you hear me?
Is a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy as far as I'm concerned. He's this writer who is he is lauded by He's lauded by the fans. He's done too many drugs. He goes completely crazy. So I thought, well, we'll just credit the story to Byron Starkweimers. Well, Alan didn't want to go for that. I wanted to include the script, which you just saw. You just showed the text of the script, and Alan didn't want to go for that either. My only concern, I haven't made any money off of this thing yet for all my scanning and all this other nonsense. I just wanted to have a historical document for the record, and something that people can study. Just to learn from, and it's kind of like we have to create this documentary history against the will of the author. So the whole thing was just really ugly and very sad. But the book turned out great.
Don, can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Gotten a lot of compliments for it, and that's it. That's the last that I'll have anything to do with this. I'm tired of being the curator for this story. 13 pages, as I mentioned. It's like I've got other things. I have my own stuff to worry about, and you can contact Gary Groth. You can try to contact Alan. Good luck. I don't, I'm not going to stand in the way of anybody reprinting this, but I'm just not going to, I've got better things to do. So why don't you give me another question? I'll try to listen. I know we're still on echo here.
Yeah. Don, can you hear me okay now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm still hearing myself talking, so I'm on a time lag.
Oh, okay. Well, if I can, I'll just
I have the volume way down, so it's not feedback.
Okay, cool. It sounds okay here. I'm not hearing any echo from you. So I guess what I wanted to ask is, I mean, I never understood, like, the whole reason that he's taken his name off of this book is just simply because he has a beef with Fantagraphics and he doesn't want to be their friend anymore, doesn't want to do favors anymore. Is that what it boils down to?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm still getting echo, but yeah, he had a beef with Steve Bissette about 1963, and
right.
And I have nothing to do with that project. I was the letterer, as you know. I lettered the logo. I lettered half the series, and I explained to you that Rick Veitch fired me halfway through because they were falling behind on their deadlines. I was lettering the Fury, and I lettered the first half of the story on Steve Bissette's pencils, and they sent the second half of the story. They sent over to Dave Gibbons to ink, and then I got those pages back that are inked, and I had to glue my lettering on them. So I got all these pages from Dave Gibbons, and then Rick Veitch gives me a call. He says, "You got the pages? You got to turn them around right away." I said, "Well, I've got a convention this weekend." And they were flying me down to, Larry Langford was flying me down to the Dallas Fantasy Fair monthly convention. And I had an airplane ticket. This is already on the schedule and everything. I said, "So it's going to be about a week before I get the lettering back to you." And my own comic book was coming out, the Savage Dragon Megaton Man was coming out at that moment. That was the first convention that I had done. And Adam West was going to be there. And the guys from Tribe were going to be there. Johnson and Stroman were there. And I said, "I'm going to this convention." So Rick fired me. Rick fired me. and I only did half of 1963, and I was out of it. I didn't participate in any other creative or business decisions with 1963. But I've been saying to
Bummer.
Steve in recent years, why the hell don't you finish this thing? And why can't grown people finish what they promise? And I'm a fan like anybody else. I want to read the end of this story, but it hasn't even been collected, right? So there were 6 issues of 1963. I was on the panel when Jim Lee, when this was announced. Here's what happened. Jim Valentino, we're at the image panel. Jim Valentino says to me, he says, go find Rick and Steve. I want to announce this on the panel. So I'm an errand boy for Jim Valentino. I go running down to the dealer's room. I find Rick Veitch and Steve Bissett. I say, hey, they want you at the image panel. So we go upstairs. We're at the image panel, and Jim Valentino announces that, I have a piece of. This is Jim Valentino penciled the Golden Age 63 characters, and I inked this. I did the lettering on a font, and they announced, okay, Alan Moore's coming back to comics, and 1963's got him. So then this was the announcement. Alan Moore's coming back to comics, and immediately Jim Lee spontaneously said he was going to draw the annual, and like everybody's like, well, okay, we'll work out the details later. I don't think Jim Lee ever had any intention of drawing anything, but that's just a guess on my part. But they did the 6 issues, Bissett and Veitch, and I inked one of Rick's stories, The U.S. Agent. I did a bunch of the lettering, but then I was out of the picture, so I had nothing to do with anything that transpired after it. But the main reason is, and again, this is my guess, but the main reason that this project was never finished was because Alan Moore just didn't feel like finishing it. You can't think of another writer who had more clout, who could have, Jim Lee or not Jim Lee, anybody could have drawn this thing. I would have drawn it. Rick could have drawn it. Steve could have drawn it. Ron Frenz could have drawn it. Anybody could have drawn the damn thing. There is a plot, I understand. Jim Valentino has the plot outline to this day, but he's never shown it to anybody.
Well, to tell you the truth, I never looked forward.
And I said on Facebook today, I said, Alan Moore made about $500,000 just from 1963 1 through 6. It wasn't like he was hurting for money. It wasn't like he had to go out and dig ditches to put food on the table. He just didn't feel like drawing. He didn't feel like writing this annual. He lost his mojo. And then Todd McFarlane threw $1 million at him to write Spawn, and Jim Lee threw another couple million at him to write, ABC Comics, America's Best. He just lost, and it means absolutely nothing to him that he promised the fans, let alone his collaborators. I mean, Rick and Steve owned a piece of it. Forget about them, and the thing's never been collected. So they could finish it tomorrow. Alan Moore could finish it. Take him 2 weeks to write the script. He could wrap this up anytime he wants. There was no adversity. There was no material reason that this project remained unfinished. And I think I suppose that's what Steve talked about in the Comics Journal 20 years ago, which still rankles Alan Moore. I don't know, but I decided. Apropos of nothing, I was. People will accuse me of being completely on Steve Bissett's side, which I am, because he's the only one I talk to. I don't talk to Rick for obvious reasons. But I did this drawing that you saw, and I don't know if you can put up the graphic, but this is the. I decided I was just going to draw. I was just going to draw my own annual, and I mentioned this to Steve. The language at the top is maybe a little rough, but it's my lettering, and I said, because I did an N-Man story for Steve, which he still hasn't published. He's doing a collection of. He owns N-Man. He owns the Fury.
Yes.
I did a 10-page story for N-Man 2 or 3 years ago. And I said, but I just kept saying this. I say this periodically online. Why the fuck don't you guys finish this thing? You're grown people. This is creator-owned comics. This is not Hollywood. This is not some evil corporation that is stopping this. This is just ego bullshit. Just grow up and do this. And Steve, well, it's not me. So, Alan completely could do this if he wanted to. He just signed a book deal for 6 figures for Bloomsbury. I will bet you $50 that Alan Moore never gets to book 3 on his book deal. I just don't think the guy can finish anything he starts. I think he's just completely full of shit. So that's just my guess. That's just my guess. I don't really know. I don't have a horse in this race. But I decided I'm just going to do my own annual. And this is I've got about 8 pages laid out. And I'm, there's a few Watchmen touches. I'm a fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of Alan Moore, and I learned a lot from interacting with his projects. I think he showed that you can do parody and satire, and then you can get serious and you can say all kinds of things. And I think that's really influenced what I'm doing with Megaton Man now. So I've learned from him, and this is my opening page. A little bit of a Watchmen touch. But these are all characters that are just kind of references to the 63 characters, and the 63 characters are obviously all references to the Marvel Comics group of the 60s. But this is the page that I lettered this morning, which is they just started penciling, and I'll show you this. It says 1963. When else? Unfinished. Unfinished where you start. And it's odd to me that I am modeling myself on John Byrne and Elsewhere. I think it's really amazing that this guy, he was a company guy. He would never do anything without permission from the editorial offices in New York. And here he is, he's writing and drawing and inking his own X-Men story, completely without editorial permission, completely without any lawyer approving it. He's using trademarks. And that to me is, not very many people agree with me at all. But I think that's an incredibly significant development in the history of intellectual property rights and the internet. And people are asking me, I post this on Facebook, and people are asking, is this a real thing? Are you really doing 1963 annual? And I say, well, you're looking at a real picture. I don't know what else it is. Does it have to be in print? Do I need permission from Jim Valentino? I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to ask for it. I don't care. It's 1963. I was born in 1961.
Yeah, I believe. The lawyers have been consulted, and they can't stop you from. They can't trademark a year, so nobody can stop you from using that.
I'm not a trademark
lawyer,
but especially if you abandon the trademark, you can't claim that you control anything. This guy, if read my blog this morning. Alan wrote to me this has been 18 months ago. Alan wrote to me. He says he's disowned all his comic book work. Well, you can't disown something and then own it. And that's not Creators Comics in any sense. I mean, just to take a step back, I know something about creating stuff, and you own it, and you have to do business. You have to sign some papers. You have to sign permission slips. You have to deal with those soul sucking business people. You have to be a grown up. I mean, that's what creative freedom is about. And this idea that creative freedom is just about shitting on your collaborators. I read The Guardian like everybody else, and I'm like, how is this guy a paragon of creators' rights? He's just all he can do is destroy his own work. So it's crazy.
I believe he's so deeply disappointed, or whatever you want to say, with the comics industry, the things that his perceived slights, and many of them are pretty crappy things that got done with his work against his wishes. So I kind of get that, but I really can't understand, not wanting to put your name on a piece of work like this, and especially not, to really give it the treatment that it deserves, and to show it off, and to give you the respect that you deserve. Because I'll be, frankly, without you, Don, it's a great script, but like, it's the synthesis. It's the fact that you took his 8-page script and turned it into a 15-page masterpiece, speaks a lot to your talents and your contributions on that side. Well, and I think everybody gives it all to Alan Moore, but I think his biggest skill was picking great collaborators like you.
Well, thank you, but I would say this. Well, I've already lost my point.
Sorry.
I find it ironic that anybody has more to complain about comics than I do. That was just news to me. That I can't think of anybody that was treated better in the world of work for hire comics. I mean, he had Karen Berger and he had DC Comics tripping all over him. Everybody treated him like royalty. Everybody, when you collaborated with Alan Moore, and especially Rick Veitch, Bissett, Totleben, they all acted like they were the Beatles. I mean, they thought the world. We all thought the world of Alan Moore. And people are talking about, well, he's perfectly within his rights to take his name off, and he's perfectly within his rights to pocket the money and never finish this 63, and he's got this right and that right. I can't imagine thinking like that. Maybe it's because I spent time outside of comics. I worked at Borders. I mean, I could tell you a sob story about, what I've been doing for these 30 years, but I certainly don't have Bloomsbury giving me 6 figures.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah. You don't have Todd McFarlane throwing action figure money at you.
I teach writing at a college. I'm an adjunct. So I just, I've been lucky enough. People remember me. People throw money at me for commissions, and they invite me to shows. There are a few people that just know me because I did an Alan Moore story or two. They couldn't care less.
Now you're Don Simpson,
or Megaton Man, or Border Worlds, but I just can't imagine looking at the world the way that the author in Pictopia looks at the world. I just can't imagine it. It's if you promise something to somebody, anybody, if you promise something to the public, and if you can humanly follow through on it, I'm doing Border Worlds. I still consider Border Worlds unfinished, but I couldn't pay the rent. That's why I had to stop. Not because I had $500,000 in the bank and Todd McFarlane hiring me to write Spawn. I just, so go ahead, hammer me. I'm sure I'll get beaten up on Reddit by the
Don. No. We come to honor Don Simpson.
Difficulties with the echo. I hope it's plays back
okay
intelligibly enough.
I think it will. The audience seems to say that it's working out okay. I want to thank you so much for your time, Don, and I super apologize for these technical difficulties.
No,
Yeah,
thank you,
maybe you
Dan.
could come.
Thank
Maybe if you
you.
want to come back.
Great making your acquaintance. Good luck with the podcast. I will. You know where to find me. And I'll keep posting my stuff. I'll keep drawing. I'll keep sharpening my pencil. Okay. So why don't we call it a day and carry on with your news program, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Don.
I'll see you in 2023.
Yeah, thank you. Oops. Thank you, Don Simpson. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with the biggest technical challenge I've ever had on one of these shows. I still don't have power at my house. I'm still on 4G connection from my phone, but I'm going to give up kudos to StreamYard because this is working. We managed to salvage it. Got a lot of great info out of Don. Okay, so let me wrap this thing up. Please, if you want to see your comics on this show, send them to the $1 Million Mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. Tune in next time. We'll talk with Paul Levitz coming up in a couple of weeks. And not too long after that, we'll be talking with Mike Richardson, and that'll be a lot of fun too. So thank you all for checking this out, sticking around. Still 15 people watching this thing live. That is amazing. We blew out in the middle of what was I was hoping to be one of my fanciest technical visual extravaganzas ever, and it turned out to be me on the hot tub just shooting the shit with Don. So that was great. Come back and check us out, and we'll see you. Wait, can I still play the credits? Why not? We will see you next time.
Who's in the $1 Million Mailbox? One guess who? Who'd never ever start an argument? Who'd never show a bit of temperament? Who's never wrong but always right? Who'd never dream of starting a fight? Who's on your screen with the comic books in? No one but Dan Shaheen.